We have not covered this story in a while, but this is actually quite urgent. I mean, it's been urgent for a while, but I think right now it's becoming even more urgent. As we can see here from The Guardian, activists push for referendum to put Cop City on the ballot in Atlanta. The effort requires organizers to collect about 70,000 signatures from Atlanta registered voters in 60 days. So a tall order here, but a broad coalition of groups in Atlanta has launched a referendum to give voters a chance to say whether they want the controversial police and fire department training center known as Cop City built in a forest southeast of the city. The effort requires organizers, like we just mentioned, to collect about 70,000 signatures from voters in 60 days. Then the questioning of the city canceling its agreement with the Atlanta Police Foundation to build the $90 million center can be added to municipal election ballots in November. The push comes after an estimated 1,000 people who showed up at City Hall on June 5th proved insufficient to stop Atlanta's City Council from approving about $67 million for Cop City. Meanwhile, machines have already begun clear-cutting trees on the project's 171-acre footprint in South River Forest. So, yeah, they had a massive turnout to protest the approval of the $67 million. That meeting went on for hours and hours and hours. I don't believe they dismissed that meeting until very early the following morning, like 5 a.m. But despite the uproar, they were able to vote through that first significant chunk of funds. We talked about Cop City when we first found out of plans to build it. In cities as plagued by the kinds of problems of poverty as Atlanta is, to spend $90 million on a fake city seems like money that can go towards housing in a real city rather than build this zone. And so there have just been some horrible developments down there that we will cover more thoroughly in the days and weeks to come. But right now, it's a 60-day mad dash to get this on the ballot. And when you think about it, this makes the most sense because what do we hear a lot, right? A lot of the retort to defund the police and things like that is, well, actually, black people like cops, right? Actually, most black people don't want the police defunded. They want more cops. And look, in some cases, when voters vote, that turns out to be true. Eric Adams won a lot of African-American votes in New York City to become mayor. But in some cases, that is not true. Obviously, Brandon Johnson rode a wave of African-American support to become the mayor of Chicago against the more pro-cop right-wing Democrat in the race. And so if you really want democracy in action, this is what makes the most sense. Let the people decide whether they want it built. It makes total sense, and we hope we can help get the word out however we can to gather those signatures so that this is on the ballot, so that the people can choose.
I mean, in regards to that element, this article did say that based on the polling, slightly more African Americans are against it than for it. So it's not overwhelmingly against it, which does give some, credit. But there's been a lot of polling on this because, of course, you're more likely to be a victim of crime, you're going to be afraid of removing police. Something like Cop City, to me, is not even about policing. That is about preparing to suppress the population, an increasingly restive population. This is Pride Month now. And it culminates in New York City at Stonewall. Right? The gay pride parade ends at Stonewall where it began. And something I will sometimes point out to my tour groups if I'm over there is Stonewall would be impossible today because the police would never allow that to happen. When you look at the story of Stonewall, that the police called for backup and a car did drive up, and when the crowd turned on the car, they drove away, and the police wound up barricaded inside the Stonewall with 2,000 gays, lesbians, and trans people throwing bottles and rocks at the Stonewall. They'd shoot those motherfuckers today so fast. And then they'd say we were being attacked. We were under attack. There were radicals in the group. There were violent people in the group. People from outside the community. They love to go for that. There's no way that would happen. There's no way that would happen. They would literally, the police were not as equipped. They were not as militarized. Today, they would bring in the tanks.
Yeah, it would look like a National Guard response.
Right. There would be no Stonewall riot today. The Stonewall riots would never have happened today. Things like Cop City are about that. It's about because you have an increasingly restive population that is increasingly less invested in the establishment and its institutions. They're getting ready to take the mask off and put the people down. It's interesting when you look at the angle they've taken on this, I think, to try to get around the complications, the complicated feelings people have about police, particularly in the Black community. They're selling it as an environmental protection move. They're not selling it as an anti-cop move. They're selling it as protecting the forest that it would be on. It's interesting that they felt they had to go in that direction, because clearly that's not the reason. It's not the reason.
Right. And we'll see who backs it, who doesn't, who helps gather signatures for that effort, and who does not. But we will definitely follow up with more Cop City stories between now and that signature deadline. And then hopefully it becomes on the ballot in November, in which case that's a major issue.
Please clap.